Now, join me in welcoming Andre and Rudy with a round of applause.
First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Mr. Sam Altman is below us today, and again, if I were you guys, I'll definitely be downstairs versus here. So first and foremost, thank you guys for showing up. We'll try to make it interesting. I have my esteemed business partner here today, Mr. Andre Iguodala, and I'll start it off by telling everybody that when I met you, you weren't a champion. You had never won anything before.
I think I won a
I don't think you won
AAU
anything.
Nationals in the summer.
I don't think you won it. I don't think you really won anything. So you obviously come to the Warriors. You start out a dynasty, but you had to learn how to become a champion, right? There's certain things that happened that you saw that eventually you realized made you champions. What was that?
I think the team aspect is a lot more intricate, and it's a lot more complex than we may all think. Like, all the pieces have to align. Luck does play a huge role in that. First and foremost, you got to have the most talent.
Yeah.
But when you say the most talent, everyone in the NBA is talented, and I think that's what most folks forget. And there was a time where I was the number one option on my team. There's also a time where I won a gold medal, and I was playing with Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, James Harden. That might have been one of the best teams ever put together. And so you realize sometimes less is more, and less is more can be more beneficial to the team or help you get over that hump. And so it took some, from Steve Kerr. I think it took some, he had to pitch me on, how his version of less is more from me and how impactful it was. And it's really hard to buy into it when, the glitz and the glamour or the fame or the notoriety. And unfortunately, your salary is affected by sacrificing. And so you come to that, fork in the road, and you try to figure out which way you want to go. And I think that's really what took my career to another stratosphere.
What was it about the Warriors, though, as it attributes to the process and developing that process time and time again that you think separated you guys from all the other teams and what you had saw before?
The most important thing was the pass. I think that was something that separated us. We had a stat, and it feels like forever ago now. I'm getting old. There was a stat, if we passed the ball more than 300 times, we had like a 97% rate, which is insane. But then we dug further into the data, and it wasn't just the number of passes, but the assist as well. And so I saw another team, they average about 300 passes a game. But we knew when we had 30 assists a game, it was 100%. 100% rate, we would win. If we had 30 assists, we would win. But there was another team that had 300 passes per game, but they were only at like 17 assists a game. And that's when it really clicked for me in terms of geeking out on the data. And sometimes you do things just because it looks good, or you just do things just to do them without any intentionality. And we knew when you made a pass, and you made that pass with the goal of winning in mind or with purpose-driven pass, right? It's a book, right? Purpose-driven life, purpose-driven this, that. But when you really pass the ball with purpose, the assists would just mount up. And then when you have just amazing players and scorers, and everyone's playing to their strengths. Clay plays to his strengths, Steph plays to his strengths, Draymond, can make a whole lot of money not having to score, and that's really how you get to the NBA. How many points can you score? And I think we really showed there was this team dynamic, and we can change the way the game was saw and played, and I think that's what took us to that level of reverence in the basketball scope, and historically we were saw as like one of the greatest teams of all time, is because people really enjoyed watching us play. Like there was a joy to teamwork, and you don't see that too often in sports where the individual gets so much of the spotlight and the shine and accolades. We kind of, and then our best players, one of the greatest human beings at the same time. The culture. Now you got the right culture being built, and that stands the test of time. It's very rare that the teams can win back-to-back championships. Like you rarely see that. The Spurs never won a back-to-back.
Never.
They never did back-to-back, and they're one of the greatest dynasties in basketball as well. They won 5 over a 10-year stretch, but to go back-to-back and then to go on a run that we went on, I think it spoke to like what we built. Our vision, our motto, our thesis, our mantras, our values. We had core values. All those things stand the test of time.
Let's transition the conversation now to investing. Most professional athletes have professional advisors that they stick with throughout their career, but yet most athletes essentially don't take that investing into their own hands and or want to do it outside their careers as well too. What motivated you to want to pursue investing outside of your career?
Well, I'll be honest. I was always curious, and my favorite subject in school was math. And it's funny you mentioned it the other day. I didn't know you remembered that, but I didn't know I was going to play in the NBA. And my sophomore year.
Probably weren't good enough to play in the NBA.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't. But my sophomore year, was that my sophomore or my junior year? Junior year, my pre-calculus teacher, Miss White, she said you should go into education. You should be a math teacher. There aren't enough African-American male math teachers. And so, no one had ever told me like you should do this. You're really good at it. Outside of basketball, locally where I'm from, where there are no NBA players, so that was never really a realistic route. And so. I always told myself, like it was always in the back of my mind. Like when I first arrived at Arizona, like education was my major until I stepped on a basketball court. And when you're at Arizona, basketball is your major. But I thought I was gonna be a math teacher, so I was always into numbers. And so when I make it pro, it's still in the back of my mind. Like I don't know how long I'm gonna be here. Like I can't believe I'm here. I'm gonna do everything I can to stay here, but at the same time, wanted to sharpen the edges. And add to the tool shed in terms of what can I do when I'm done playing basketball. Like that fear was always there. Like what are you going to do when this is over? You hear so many horror stories. Guys go into midlife crisis at age 25, to 30, because your career is the career, and the window is shorter than most would like to admit or see the reality to. And so that I was just really curious, and I wanted to surround myself with like-minded individuals, folks who could teach me, who could mentor me. And I found law of attraction. You always run into what you're looking for, and Rudy was one of the guys that I ran into, and I think we just saw the similar things in one another. I think he knew that I wanted to learn, and I knew he was somebody that saw something different in me, saw me as just more than an athlete. And then from there, the journey begins, and you kind of blind faith to see where it can take you. But the main thing was, like, what do I need to know to get to wherever I can go, not knowing where that was, and here we are today.
Yeah, you've done a great job of building a tremendous network using just being an NBA player, right? And that gravitational pull to build a massive network of the top CEOs and most influential operators in the world. Can you tell the aspiring CEOs here and executives of the future exactly how you did that?
Well, first and foremost, like I had my favorite athletes, but once I got into NBA, I just started asking myself, like, how do you buy an NBA team? And now I'm identifying all the owners for NBA teams. How did he acquire the team? How did he acquire a team? None of them acquired the team playing sports. So what world are these individuals coming from? And once you start peeling back layers, now you start understanding, like, there's a different world. And then there's one question I will always ask myself. back then the contracts weren't $1 billion, but they were a lot of money. And I would always say, if someone's willing to give an African American $50 million to shoot a ball, how much money does he have? And that's when I started to realize there was a different world. And I started asking questions like, then I got the S&P's, the Dummies Guide to the S&P 500, or the Dummies Guide to Investing, or, there's mid cap, small cap, large caps, there's stocks and bonds, assets versus liability. Now I'm just trying to get my hands on like the basic level of understanding of business. And from there, I really just didn't have any fear. I never had fear of asking people questions.
Yeah.
And so Ed Snyder, who was the owner of the Philadelphia Sixers, no one would speak to him. Hey, how'd you get into your world? And then I took it upon myself with the advice from Rudy. I think you should be involved with the Players Association. Got on the executive committee. Now I'm looking at what every owner in NBA does. And then when I would see them in meetings, how did you get into your business? And then from there, talking to David Stern, we built a great relationship where I could just stop by his office at any time, ask him any questions. How did you look at growing the game? When did you know the game should be grown globally? How did you know to have pros play in the 1992 Olympics for the first time? How did you know to go to China? Just start asking questions. And then from there, I think people saw that it wasn't just the surface questions. I wanted to start building relationships. So, I was talking to the cohort earlier. Now I'm doing internships. Like, hey, I would love to come work for you. And they thought I was joking. But during the lockout, I didn't have a job, wasn't getting a check. I went and worked for Merrill Lynch in New York. So I spent the week up there looking at every different parts of the business, from the local banking side to the private banking side. Then I followed a VC. I remember seeing Tesla, a test drove a Tesla in 2011. I wish I would have invested. That's just how curiosity just kind of really helped me build that network.
Tell us about some of the CEOs now. Again, you've learned from a lot of them. Tell me what you've learned and what's the common theme as it attributes to, you think, most of their success?
Well, I think they really love working. I think, the parallel, and I learned this from Tien, from Zora, right? Zora is a subscription management software company. And talking about IPOing, and he's like, when you Eric Wong from Zoom, he said something very similar. He said, when you IPO, it's like making it to the pros. It's like, oh, I'm finally here, but now the work starts. And I think it's not like they're addicted to success. They're just addicted to finding work and crushing space, which is a Navy SEALs term that we learned at the Warriors. It was like, you should never be idle. You should always be looking to something to take over and win at. And it's just like you become hyper competitive, but it's not for the sake of being competitive, but you just want to make change. And so I've been able to, find motivation in building for my community. And I wake up every day saying, how can I, put my fingerprints that will stand the test of time. And I think that's very similar to a lot of CEOs where, they're looking for work and they're crushing the space. They're getting to it as fast as they can. How can they continuously keep the moat? Yeah. As we go on, all of you in here are trying to disrupt something. And so they all, it's the innovator's dilemma as well. You got a fiduciary responsibility to your investors, but your investors don't understand that, at some point, someone's going to try to take out GE, which is currently happening. So they're constantly trying to innovate, but at the same time, they have a legacy play in place that they're trying to prove it's going to stand the test of time. And so you just constantly keep your finger on the pulse, but always looking ahead. And so it's like you're always flying that plane while you're improving it in the air at the same time.
I think another thing that I'd like to add is that they love the process, right? They've all fallen in love with the essence of the process, and I think that's something that you've emulated as well too, just moving forward. Can you tell us who your favorite CEO is, if you don't mind, and what you've learned from him?
Is he a CEO
or her?
Well, right now, one of my favorite guys is Brett Taylor. And he's heavily involved with the guy down the street or or downstairs, wherever Sam is. But Brett Taylor was working at, he crashed a car.
The CEO of Salesforce.
He was the CEO of Salesforce, but he got started he had to pay off damage he did to a car. Oh, he ran into the guy at the gas station's car, and he had to pay for it. And so he's like, I'll work it off. So the guy gave him a job, and then while he was there, the guy who ran the gas station needed a website.
That's right.
And he was like, find somebody that can make a website. He never coded, never did a website. And so he went home and studied on how to build a website. And he built his website for the gas station. And then he got paid for it. So he's like, this is more money than working at the gas station. So I'm just going to make websites now. And then that turned into, he invented the like button, Google Maps.
Yeah.
So he spent time at Google. Then he was at Meta now. It's called Meta now. And then that turned into, he was at Salesforce as a co-CEO. And then now he's got his own AI startup called Sierra, correct?
Yeah.
And he's one of the few individuals, I think he knows how smart he is, but he doesn't lead it on. Most really, really smart people, you all, you're like athletes where you have the ego. You know, athlete will let you know how good he is at his sport. And, you know, most, high IQ individuals will let you know how smart they are. They'll speak it at you. They'll throw a bunch of phrases at you, knowing your brain can't comprehend most of it. But Brett is able to communicate in a manner where quite like I had never seen. He did Fireside Chat with Mosaic last year sometime. That was November. And I was just blown away with how he can communicate. And he's so humble in the way he carries himself. And from what I've heard, he's deep in the weeds at his company. He's just not the CEO founder, but like he's on the ground floor working with everybody within the company. He's coding with the coders. When they do team offsites, like they know exactly who he is. They know what he's about, and he's about building special products. And he's just fallen in love with the process.
Yeah, I agree. So now you are founding partner and general partner at Mosaic, the first NBA player to have that distinction. Tell me exactly what you've taken from the court to now your new venture fund, and what's differentiated with what you're doing here at Mosaic versus all the other venture funds out there.
Well, I think I've taken a discipline, and then I've also understood, I can't be Steph Curry, so Fatima is a beast. And I know I can't be her. And so what I try to do is learn as much from her, try to assist her in any manner. And that's just all our partners. We have a very unique team, and really making sure I do what I do best and bringing that value add to the core team. And I think what we're trying to build is, I think we're different. We aren't traditional, but we have the experience. One of the jobs I took was at Cardinal Ventures, and my boss is now one of our partners. She's in the back.
Boss, can you raise your hand, please? That's Andre's former boss.
But working with her was a great experience. Like, she was a real boss, and she's had amazing success. She's another one that just fell in love with the process. She loves being involved in great companies and great businesses, and she's continuously learning about different things and keeping herself up to date with how the business is changing. And so we got a very unique team. And for me, it's where I come from. Not too many folks look like me in most of the rooms that I've entered since middle school. I was rejected at the door by a teacher because I was the only African American male, and she didn't think that I was going into the right classroom. And so every time I've come into new arenas, it's been the same case. And so trying to make that way, trying to build those roads and avenues for folks that look like me, but for the underdogs as well. I think that's a big part of it. The underdog is usually the one that wins, having a chip on your shoulder. And, we're looking for those founders with chips on their shoulders, and we want to prove the rest of the world wrong along with them.
And how do you think just having a different background and having a different experience from most venture capitalists kinds of helps you see companies and evaluate them?
Mm-hmm. Well, different perspective is more valuable than we know. I mean, you just take the one stat. You know, the more diverse your board, the more profitable you are. Like that is a stat. That's not something I made up or heard. Like that is a real thing, and so it's kind of it's confusing as to why all businesses haven't applied that to their way of thinking. And one thing I know about African Americans, we're the largest consumers per capita. Like we spend the most money on stuff, and yet we're not a part of the decision-making process and how these products are delivered. And so it's like, how are you serving a cohort that plays no part in the process of how it's delivered to them? And so, you know, there's so much room for growth there alone, and that's helped me see, you know, like that alone lets me know that I'm very valuable in any room I step in, because I'm the only one that looks the way that I do. And so I have the perspective that I have coming from the communities that I come from, and having an understanding of, you know, our culture, you know, how we purchase, you know, how we interact, you know, how we deal with product, you know, and how we use them, and, you know, how we sell them. And so I always try to look at it from that perspective, as opposed to, you know, being falling into, you know, the identity crisis and not knowing how I fit in that room.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we always talk about how markets are changing now, and they look different from how they looked in the last 10 years. And again, being a venture fund moving forward, you always talk about how excited you are, right? Can you explain and describe the things that you're excited about moving forward?
Yeah, well, I was frightened by something the other day, I'll be honest. The dynamic pricing is in AI. So it's knowing your purchasing habits and knowing how much money you'll spend. And so, like, there will be no more deals because it knows that I'm going to buy it anyway, which was funny. But at the same time, I think it does solve for a lot of inefficiencies, inequalities. And so, you know, knowledge is power as long as you don't abuse that power. And so as we build these, a lot of these AI products, a more personalized experience, but I think a more connected experience. And then as the executive director of the National Basketball Players Association, there's this great opportunity for a lot of our athletes to, you know, have a closer reach to the fan base, and the opportunity, you talk about social capital that athletes have, and being able to spread their wings, like it's unlimited. And I'm excited to be at the forefront of that, to see what that looks like, how it's going to be implemented and rolled out to you know, our athletes who come from the communities that I come from. And so a part of that process is educating them on, you know, how valuable and how impactful this can all be, and how we could take this to our communities and help our communities have access to it in ways that we've never had access to before.
That's great. I was told that we need to leave some time for Q&A. I have one gentleman right here that I promised that I'll kick it off with.
My question to you is, as you're looking at some of the companies that are either underfunded or just need to be really noticed more by the masses, I guess, how do you see a lot of founders kind of tackle the problem of, you know, bias in AI?
Great question.
Should have walked him downstairs first.
Yeah, right. No, but the funny thing about that is we were having this conversation with one of our, we do updates with our founders, with myself and all our founders, you know, because most of our GPs, well, it's really Fatima and Sam, they are more hands-on with our founders. And so I try to find time where I carve out for our founders. And we were talking yesterday with one of our founders, and we were asking them that specific question. You know, it's the product is tailored for inner city communities, but how are you looking to build the relationship, and how are you making the right cultural decisions for that community if you have no one on your team that looks like the folks that come from that community? And so that's really, you got to be able to ask the hard questions. And going back to access, now that I have access to some of the, you know, best, brightest individuals building some of these companies, I'm also trying to identify, you know, the top talent from my community to either work with these companies or even have access to it to start it on their own. And so I think that's a big part of it too. It's just, being an influence to folks that, it's different avenues of being successful. And so that's a part of the brand. Everybody wants to be famous. And yes, there aren't too many places I can go without being recognized. But in saying that, I tell people all the time, like, I'd much rather be, building the next great AI company. Who was I talking to yesterday? I said, we could trade places right now. Ravi. I said, Ravi Gupta, I said, you can play NBA, and I'd rather build, the next Instacart or be the next great investor, because it's impact on both sides. But, our community is been so narrowed into sports and entertainment. There's so much growth for us in other areas, and I think tech is one of those areas where, well, I think we learned in order to have that type of impact that we want to have, we have to make a dent in this arena, and that's just bringing folks in here with us that look like us to solve for that exact thing.
Next questions?
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everything you've been saying. My name is Kiana. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Beaker. And I really appreciate how much you've been talking about impact. And I'm curious if you, when evaluating companies to invest in, if you think about the impact that they're having on like society or climate or human beings in general, do you think about that alongside with the business? And how much do you value impact when you're making investments?
That's a really good question, because at the end of the day, you work for your LPs. And if you don't bring back the return, that'll be your last fund. And so, you try to have the right balance. And our portfolio is there's a heavy base of healthcare companies. And I think that speaks to, our thesis, and you can be impactful, and you can have a large return. And then one company we've identified as a possible fund returner is low-income housing and how it's being built. And so you just have to, you have to be intentional in how you go about it, and you have to be very creative, because at the end of the day, you have to return the portfolio to raise the next fund and do it all over again. But I think there are a few great companies out there that have been able to do that. There's been a few great consumer products, which is probably the hardest thing to return on, that have proven that out as well. They're not doing so well right now, but Allbirds had an amazing moment. And then I seen something similar. Someone else was building up with recyclable bottles just yesterday. And so you just have to be creative. We like to say, bend the risk curve. Yeah. And how we think about things, and where there's a will, there's a way.
Hey guys, thanks so much for coming out. My name's Spencer. I work at a data fund, so venture capital firm. We spend a lot of time looking at portfolio construction, and looking at various models and which ones outperform. Actually, with a Stanford professor here, we found that usually, if you want to move from a top quartile to decile fund, you have to do one of two things. You can either have a YC kind of combinator model, where you're investing in many, many companies, or you can concentrate. And so I'm curious how you guys have constructed your portfolio. If you're concentrating, heavily into winners, or if you have a traditional structure, we're making 30, 40 investments.
We have debates on this all the time, and because we had an interesting moment when we were raising, where we raised at the like I said before, you got to be lucky, right? So we feel like we raised at the perfect time, where we raised right before there was this freeze in spending. Now it was really hard to raise. Interest rates going up. The money wasn't pouring in. The valuations have been, seems like, corrected. The freeze of the IPO has frozen the entire market. And so we were just having a great conversation on, how many pre-seeds should we have, how many seeds should we have. And so we're right there on seed and Series A, and how difficult product market fit is. But when we built the fund, we had a thesis of how many companies we wanted to be pre-seed, C, Series A, Series B, you know, and then leaving room for follow-ons on the first three. It's still held true today. And so I think we've done a good job of, you know, I guess we guessed right. We've made small changes and tweaked things here and there to stay, you know, right where we should be in any given moment. But I think that's a sentiment to the team we put together and how we put it together thoughtfully.
Thanks. Andre, how much do you leverage your MBA network for deals, prosecution, investors, et cetera? Are you taking advantage of your history there?
It's funny because not really. I mean, most of the inbound is based on my NBA career. I'll say that. But when I'm reaching out, I try to remove it because I think that this puts me in a better position for folks to take me serious. You know, it may not, but just subconsciously, I tell myself, you know, mentioning basketball can take away from the respect that one would need to have to either win a deal or to make a connection. You know, if it happens, it happens. If they recognize me, better. But Fatima and I have been on a million calls, and I like don't mention the basketball part. But I mean, we get a lot of inbound based on that. But for the most part, I don't mention it too much.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andre. Unfortunately, I think that's going to be our last question, but thank you guys for that, and I think we can give one more big round of applause.